Jared Moskowitz walked into that hearing looking calm, almost casual. But within minutes, what started as a standard congressional exchange turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments Pam Bondi has faced in months. This wasn't just another politician trying to score a viral clip. This was someone who knew Bondi personally, someone who had worked with her in the past, and someone who understood exactly how to make his criticism land. And by the time Moskowitz was done, the room had shifted. Bondi looked visibly rattled, and the internet had already started clipping the moment that everyone would be talking about. Because what made this hearing so explosive wasn't just the subject matter.
And I'll always be appreciative for your assistance when you were Attorney General in Florida after the shooting at my high school at Marjory Stoneman Douglas in my hometown of Parkland when we passed a bipartisan bill, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, which was the largest policy response to a school shooting in American history. Your department also prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law a constituent of mine and former felon that had plans to kill me when he was picked up by law enforcement after he was target practicing in his backyard with 2 rifles, a scope, a silencer, 3,000 rounds of ammunition, an anti-Semitic manifesto. My name was the only name on their target list, and my kids found out about this from their friends at school. So thank you. However, the most transparent administration in American history. Before Trump, we didn't know the word transparency, apparently. It's been 12 months since you gave Republican influencers part 1 of the Epstein files. You said the list was on your desk. Then a memo came out and said that there was no list. Phase 2 of the binders never happened. The President of the United States says the Epstein thing is a hoax. He blasts his own base for wanting the release of the files. He blamed Barack Obama. Republicans voted against the release of the files in the Rules Committee. Then they refused to even return to the Rules Committee until they could be protected from future votes on the release. Speaker Johnson sends Congress home a day early before break. They sent the Deputy Attorney General to meet with Maxwell. She says something favorable about the president. Miraculously, she gets transferred to a minimum security facility. No one can explain why. Miraculously, the leaks to the Wall Street Journal stop. We come back from break. We have the Massey discharge petition. Republicans drop a rule, a non-binding resolution trying to kill the Massey discharge petition. The White House says passing the Massey discharge petition is a hostile act. Trying to stop the necessary 218 signatures, according to Republican members that signed it, the White House brought them into the Situation Room, you know, the place where the president goes for time of war, promising things like appropriations or maybe even to primary them. People in the room say you were there. It didn't work. We get the 218 signatures. We eventually passed the Massey petition. You guys didn't release the files. You were forced by Congress. Every member of the House except one and the entire Senate. The reason the president signed it is because it was a veto-proof majority. We can't agree on anything, and yet the entire House but one member and the whole Senate forced the administration to release the files. Kash Patel under oath said to Senator Kennedy, the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. We know now that's not true. According to documents, Epstein had a worldwide sex trafficking ring. Girls from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Russia, Paris, modeling agencies sending him girls. He even had a relationship with a summer camp where he groomed girls at a picnic table. Ghislaine Maxwell says 29 Epstein associates cut secret DOJ deals. Turns out there is a list. 6 names readily available if you unredact them. Co-conspirators named, but we got them when you unredact them. Maxwell recently tells a House Oversight Committee that she wants clemency to release more names. Kash Patel under oath said Trump's name appears less than 100 times in the files. We now know that's not true. Trump's name appears more times in the Epstein files than God's name appears in the book about God. Okay, by the way, this is the Trump Bible. Move over, King James. Trump's name also appears more times in the Epstein file than Harry Potter's name appears in the 7 books about Harry Potter. Lutnick says that in 2008, he went to Epstein's home, says he had a massage table in the living room, that Epstein said he got one every day, that it was the right type of massage. He and his wife decide to leave and say they'll never be in a room with him again. Howard then says, I'm sure the Epstein stuff is all on video. He was the greatest blackmailer of all time. Well, how would Howard know that? But now the files are public, and in 2012, we found out that he and his family are on Epstein Island after Epstein pled guilty to state charges. I'm from Florida. I take my family to Disney World, not to Epstein Island. There are documents in the files that dispute the president's claim that he kicked Epstein out of his club. Allegedly, the president said that he asked Epstein to leave. Supported now, that's disputed, though, by statements from the manager of the club. Now, Madam Attorney General, I have like 25 seconds left. So because I'm curious, and I'd like to see you flip to the Jared Moskowitz section of the binder. I'm interested to see what staff provided on the oppo on me, and because we're in the Olympics, I'm going to give it a grade. I just want to see how good it is. So give me your best one.
So first of all, nothing is funny about mocking the Bible and holding up a Trump Bible. That's what you did. You made a joke, and I find offense to that. That's all I have to say.
I want it from the burn book.
Shame.
I want it from the burn book. Which is the best one? What you got?
Has expired. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
It was the way Moskowitz built his case. He didn't start with shouting. He didn't start with accusations. He started with something far more disarming: respect. That's what made everything that followed hit even harder. He reminded Bondi, and everyone watching, that they had a real history. He acknowledged the moments when she had actually helped him and his community. He thanked her for standing with Parkland after the school shooting that changed his hometown forever. He even thanked her for helping prosecute a dangerous man who had allegedly targeted him and his family. For a moment, it almost felt like this hearing might go in a completely different direction. But that moment didn't last, because after setting that emotional foundation, Moskowitz pivoted. And when he did, the entire tone of the room changed. The respect was over. The warm memories were done. What came next was a methodical takedown of Bondi's handling of one of the most politically explosive scandals in recent memory, the Jeffrey Epstein files. And Moskowitz clearly came prepared. He wasn't there to make vague complaints. He came armed with dates, contradictions, public statements, congressional maneuvers, and a timeline designed to make one point crystal clear: that Bondi and the administration had promised transparency, but in his view, they had failed to deliver. That was the real setup behind the explosion everyone is talking about. For more than a year, the Epstein files had become a political minefield. Public pressure kept building for the release of more documents tied to Epstein's network, his associates, and the powerful people who crossed paths with him. The issue had become bigger than one scandal. For millions of people, it became symbolic of something deeper: the idea that powerful people always seem to have layers of protection ordinary people never get. And that growing frustration created the perfect backdrop for a moment like this. Pam Bondi had been one of the key faces tied to promises of transparency. There had been public statements about documents, lists, binders, and phases of release. But as time went on, frustration only grew. Critics argued that key material was delayed, redacted, or withheld. Supporters said legal process takes time and sensitive material has to be handled carefully. But regardless of where people stood, one thing was undeniable: the issue had become politically radioactive. Moskowitz knew that, and he used every second of his speaking time like someone who understood exactly how much attention this moment would get. Once he pivoted from the personal to the political, he started laying out a blistering timeline. He talked about Bondi's past comments suggesting that major Epstein-related material was sitting ready to be released. He brought up public confusion over whether certain lists even existed. He referenced how Republican lawmakers had resisted efforts tied to broader disclosure. He pointed to procedural fights in Congress, pressure campaigns, and behind-the-scenes efforts that critics say were designed to slow the release process. And what made it so effective was the pace. Moskowitz didn't give Bondi space to settle in. He kept moving. Every sentence stacked on the last. Every point built pressure. He spoke like someone building a wall brick by brick, making it harder and harder for Bondi to simply dismiss him as grandstanding. Even people who may not have agreed with every argument could feel the momentum shifting in the room. This wasn't random outrage. It was structured. It was deliberate. And it was designed for maximum impact. But even that wasn't the part people would remember most, because the exchange truly crossed into viral territory when Moskowitz reached for symbolism. And in modern political hearings, symbolism is everything that he held up what he described as the Trump Bible, turning what could have been another dry oversight hearing into a visual moment built for clips, headlines, and endless social media replay. Then came the line that instantly spread everywhere: his comparison about Donald Trump's name appearing throughout Epstein-related documents. It was provocative, dramatic, and clearly crafted to spark a reaction. Now, to be clear, mentions in documents do not automatically mean wrongdoing. Public figures can appear in files, records, or reporting for many reasons. Trump has denied wrongdoing related to Epstein, and no criminal charges against him have emerged from these references. That distinction matters. But what Moskowitz understood in that moment was that hearings aren't just about legal nuance. They're about perception, momentum, and public pressure. And that line landed like a thunderclap. You could feel the energy change. Members shifted. Staffers reacted. Viewers at home suddenly leaned in. Because regardless of political side, everyone watching understood that the hearing had just crossed into something bigger than routine oversight. This was now a full spectacle. And Pam Bondi had a choice. Directly engage the substance of what Moskowitz was saying, or find another way to respond. What happened next is what made the moment feel even more brutal. Instead of fully engaging the broader allegations Moskowitz had laid out, Bondi zeroed in on the Bible joke. She said nothing was funny about mocking the Bible and accused him of making light of something serious. On its face, that may have seemed like a moral pushback. But politically, it had a very different effect. To many viewers, it looked like she was sidestepping the larger issue, and Moskowitz was ready for that too, because he had one more move left, and it may have been the smartest part of his entire performance. By that point in the hearing, reports had already circulated that Bondi and her team had come armed with binders full of opposition research and personal attack notes on members questioning her. Critics online had already started calling it a burned book. It became a symbol of what many saw as a defensive, politically theatrical strategy rather than straightforward accountability. Moskowitz saw the opening immediately. With barely any time left on the clock, he did something that completely flipped the power dynamic. Instead of letting Bondi hold the leverage of whatever personal material she may have had prepared, he challenged her directly. He invited her to open the binder and read whatever she had on him out loud, right there, to his face. That was the genius of the moment, because suddenly, Bondi's entire strategy was exposed. If she read from the binder, she risked looking petty and vindictive. If she refused, the existence of the binder itself became part of the story. Moskowitz turned what was supposed to be a shield for Bondi into a spotlight aimed directly back at her, and the room knew it. There are certain moments in hearings where you can almost feel everyone realize, in real time, that something has gone sideways. This was one of those moments. The hearing stopped feeling like a controlled process and started feeling like a genuine clash where one side had clearly seized the narrative. That's why this clip spread so quickly online. That it wasn't just because of the Epstein angle. It wasn't just because Trump's name was involved. It wasn't even just because of Bondi. It went viral because it had everything modern audiences respond to: emotional tension, personal history, receipts, humor, risk, symbolism, and a clean payoff. Moskowitz understood the mechanics of viral political storytelling better than most. He gave viewers a beginning, middle, and climax all in one speaking slot. First, he established credibility by thanking Bondi. Then, he built tension by laying out the broader transparency failures. Then, he delivered a visual and rhetorical punch with the Bible moment. And finally, he ended with the burn book challenge, which left Bondi looking cornered. That structure is exactly why clips like this travel. But the bigger reason this hearing mattered goes beyond the theatrics. At its core, this clash tapped into something much deeper that has been simmering in public life for years: distrust. Distrust in institutions. Distrust in promises of transparency. Distrust in whether powerful people are ever really held accountable. That's why the Epstein issue continues to have such a grip on public attention. It's not just about one case. For many people, it has become shorthand for a broader fear that elite systems protect themselves. Every delay, every redaction, every contradiction feeds that fear. Every public fight like this becomes a proxy battle over whether the truth is actually being revealed or carefully managed. And hearings like this matter because they shape the public story around those questions. Pam Bondi now faces more than just one viral clip. She faces the reality that moments like this can crystallize broader frustrations into a simple public impression. Fair or not, perception often moves faster than facts in politics. Once an image sticks, it can be hard to shake. And the image left by this hearing was not one of control. For Bondi's supporters, they may argue that Moskowitz was grandstanding, exaggerating, and using spectacle to score points. They may say his Bible joke crossed a line and that hearings should focus more on legal substance than viral moments. That argument will absolutely be made. But for Bondi's critics, this hearing was confirmation of something they already believed, that when pressure rises, her team turns to messaging, optics, and political defense rather than clear answers. That divide is exactly why this clip became such a lightning rod. And then there's the Trump angle. Donald Trump remains one of the most polarizing figures in American politics, and any story connecting him to unresolved controversy instantly becomes magnified. Even when claims are disputed or require context, the sheer gravity of his name guarantees attention. Moskowitz knew that mentioning Trump in the way he did would instantly make this hearing impossible to ignore. That was strategic. But it was also risky, because when you go that big, the stakes rise. Every word gets scrutinized. Every comparison gets debated. Every fact gets challenged. Moskowitz clearly understood that risk and chose to lean into it anyway, likely because he believed the larger point about transparency was worth the controversy. And that gamble paid off in the short term. The clip exploded. The hearing dominated political discussion. Bondi's response was dissected everywhere. And once the internet gets hold of a moment like this, it takes on a life of its own. But what happens next may matter even more than what happened in that room, because public pressure doesn't disappear after one viral exchange. If anything, moments like this intensify scrutiny. More questions will be asked. More hearings may follow. More lawmakers will likely push for additional disclosures. The broader Epstein transparency issue is clearly not going away. That means this hearing may end up being remembered as more than just a flashy political moment. It could become one of those clips people look back on later as the point where public frustration boiled over in a way the administration could no longer contain. And that's what makes this so fascinating. On the surface, it looked like a dramatic hearing clash. But underneath, it was really a battle over narrative control. Bondi came in expecting another day of tough but manageable oversight. Moskowitz came in understanding that if he could frame the story correctly, one hearing could change the conversation entirely. And for at least one afternoon, he did exactly that. He took a complicated, messy, highly sensitive issue and turned it into a clear, emotional story millions of people could instantly understand. A powerful official under pressure, a lawmaker armed with specifics, a symbolic prop, a sharp line, and one final trap that exposed the political theater of the whole room. That's rare. Most hearings are forgotten within hours. This one won't be, because even beyond the headlines, the most memorable part of the exchange was the personal layer underneath it all. The fact that Moskowitz began by thanking Bondi made the criticism feel more credible. It showed viewers that this wasn't simple partisan reflex. At least in presentation, it felt like disappointment from someone who believed she could have handled things differently. That emotional contrast is what made the turn hit so hard. It's one thing when two lifelong rivals clash. It's another when someone who once publicly appreciated your help becomes one of your sharpest critics on national television. That makes the moment feel bigger, more human, and harder to dismiss. And Bondi seemed to understand that too, because for all the focus on the Bible exchange and the binder challenge, the most revealing part may have been what wasn't said. Bondi never fully defused the central perception Moskowitz was creating, that there was still more the public didn't know, and that transparency had been mishandled. Sometimes in politics, silence speaks louder than rebuttal. That's why this moment continues to resonate. It wasn't just loud. It felt consequential. It felt like one of those moments where public frustration, political timing, and performance all collided in exactly the right way to create something bigger than the hearing itself. And whether you think Moskowitz went too far or think Bondi deserved every second of it, one thing is impossible to deny. He walked into that room understanding the stakes, and he walked out having completely changed the story. What began as another hearing ended as a national political flashpoint. And if this exchange proved anything, it's that the Epstein transparency fight is far from over. The questions are still hanging there. The pressure is still building. The public still wants answers. And after a moment this explosive, every next move will be watched even more closely. Because sometimes the biggest political moments aren't the ones carefully planned behind closed doors. Sometimes they happen live, under oath, in a room full of cameras, when one lawmaker decides he's done waiting for answers and says what millions of people have been thinking. And when that happens, the fallout doesn't end when the gavel drops. It's only just beginning. That if you thought this hearing was intense, make sure you stay tuned, because the next twist in this story could be even bigger. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did Jared Moskowitz expose something important here? Or did this hearing cross a line into pure political theater? I want to hear what you think. And if you enjoy sharp breakdowns of the biggest political clashes and the stories behind the headlines, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.